Harry Gray. I'm chairman of the board of the Arnold and Mabel Beckman Foundation. I'm also the Arnold and Beckman Professor of Chemistry at the California Institute of Technology.
I'm Jacqueline Dorrance, and I am the former Executive Director and CEO of the Arnold and Mabel Beckman Foundation, recently retired, and am now a trustee of the Arnold and Mabel Beckman Foundation. The Arnold and Mabel Beckman Foundation primarily was founded by Dr. Beckmann to support basic scientific research in chemistry and the life sciences. And we do that through supporting our 5 Beckman Institutes and several different programs, including the Beckman Young Investigator Program, Beckman Scholars Program, Beckman Postdoc Program, and we have a Beckman Argyros Award in Vision Research, and we're funding a macular research initiative also.
Dr. and Mrs. Beckman started their philanthropy some years ago. Actually, their first building was at Caltech, the Beckman Auditorium, in the early 1960s. And they continued to support chemistry and biology and life sciences at Caltech and at the University of Illinois and other places for a period. And for a long time they thought they would give away all their money in their lifetime, but they decided to form a foundation in the 1970s, the Arnold and Mabel Beckman Foundation, and became a much more regular donor to places, entertaining proposals. And in the 1980s, they started philanthropy on a very large scale by funding these Beckman Institutes, these 5 Beckman Institutes, the one here at the University of Illinois, the one at Caltech, one at the City of Hope, one at Stanford, and one at the University of California, Irvine. These 5 major institutes the foundation has funded continuously since they were started about 25 years ago. This is roughly the 25th anniversary of the University of Illinois Beckman Institute. In 1989, Mrs. Beckman passed away. And that's when Ted Brown and I entered the scene in a more direct way, because Dr. Beckmann in 1989 was very distraught over his loss of Mrs. Beckman, and he needed a lot of help at that time. And Ted and I had been advising him informally through our roles as founding directors of two big Beckman Institutes, the one at Caltech, which I founded, and the one here at Illinois, which Ted Brown founded. So we were both very, very close to Arnold Beckman, and he sought our advice at this time, and that's when we started the programs that Jackie has just referred to. The Beckman Young Investigator Program was started really by Ted Brown and myself, with the help of a few other people, but we encouraged Dr. Beckman to start that program in the early 90s. When he was looking for things to do, he had so many proposals, he really was confused about what he should be doing. He'd always ask Mabel for help, his wife of many years, and he and Mabel had made decisions together. And now for the first time, Mabel's gone. And so I think Ted and I filled a role there, filled a void in Dr. Beckman's life after Mabel died. And Ted, of course, was very special during this time because such a wonderful human being. He advised Dr. Beckman on all kinds of matters at that time, helping him through the crisis, really. And we started the Beckman Young Investigators Program in the early 90s. And a few years later, with the help of a trustee whose name was Don Shields, Ted and I and Don Shields together were leaders in starting the Beckman Scholars Program, a program for undergraduate researchers that Jackie referred to. And most recently, we've started a postdoc program. A lot of it is, the postdoc program is modeled a lot after one that Beckman Institute here at Illinois has had for years. And so the foundation, in a nutshell, after Mrs. Beckman's death, the foundation has really concentrated on support of young people, young investigators, postdocs, undergraduate researchers in chemistry, biology, and life sciences. That's what we do. And it was Ted Brown's leadership and inspiration in the late 80s and early 90s that helped us really get these programs going and off the ground. You know, Ted and I had a long relationship with Dr. and Mrs. Beckman. My wife and I met Dr. and Mrs. Beckman in the late 60s at Caltech. Arnold Beckman was the chairman of the board at Caltech, and he came to one of my talks about the time that I arrived at Caltech, and he and Mrs. Beckman both came to one of my talks, and I'm not sure Mrs. Beckman understood anything in my talk, but she liked the way I talked. And she came up afterwards with Arnold Beckman and said, "Arnold, this young man, I don't understand anything he said, but I really like the way he said it." and so we bonded. That was my experience, and from then on, we formed a strong friendship with the Beckmans over the years. Through the time I was chairman of the division at Caltech in chemistry, and I worked on projects with Dr. Beckman at Caltech. Got to know him really well. I think he trusted me, and that's how I worked my way into the foundation, was through lots of projects with Dr. Beckman early on. And then I worked with him to found the Beckman Institute at Caltech. So slowly but surely he asked me for more and more advice, asked me to form a science advisory council in the late 80s and early 90s. And Ted Brown was a member of that. I was the first chair of the Science Advisory Council. Ted was one of the prominent members. When I stepped down as chair, Ted became chair of the Science Advisory Council. And so since we'd both had that experience in leadership in the Science Advisory Council, Dr. Beckman asked us both to join the board. And so it was a process of working with him over the years, over many years, on projects, advice, and so forth. And I think Ted and I both got to the point where Dr. Beckman really trusted us. He trusted us to work with him, and he asked us to join the board. And we did. We joined the board together. And that's the way it worked. It was a long process. It wasn't something that happened overnight. Dr. Beckman, I think, liked to really see how people worked and whether they were trustworthy, their advice was any good, whether you liked to work with them, and so forth.
I think that
and Ted certainly,
that's how it started. And he always had his friends, his trusted friends, on the board. And it, like as Harry mentioned, he worked with them for years before he asked them to serve on his board. And so I think since then we've tried to replicate that model to a degree by working with his trusted friends, inviting them to be on the board. And now that there aren't as many people that knew Dr. Beckman, we're working with the program recipients. So the early recipients of the Beckman Young Investigator Program that we've known We trust them. We know what they're about. We invite them to serve on the Scientific Advisory Council, watch them for a period of time. And I think that's what will happen in the future, is we'll just continue that model, is to make sure that we vet them fairly closely and carefully before they're invited to serve on the board.
Yeah, what Jackie is saying is that the Beckman Foundation and all the recipients, and the young people we've supported, it's one very big family. We feel like a family. We have an annual symposium where members come back, very loyal, people come back. We've taken our former Beckman investigators and put them on the Science Advisory Council. Our Science Advisory Council now is comprised entirely of alums from the Beckman Young Investigator Program. As Jackie said, we can watch them and see how they develop, and then the ones who really are stepping up to the plate and helping us out a lot, and knew Dr. Beckman, knew what Dr. Beckman wanted, which is very important. He wanted to support basic research in chemistry, biology, and life sciences, medical work, fundamental research. Once they understand that completely and know absolutely what Dr. Beckman wanted, then we invite them to become members of the board. And we've just done the first Beckman Young Investigator promotion, if you like, to member of the board. And we will follow this model, I'm pretty sure, in subsequent years. We will run people in who are part of the family, who understand exactly what Dr. Beckman wanted to do.
I think it's critical to continue to support Dr. Beckman's vision. And his vision was to support basic fundamental research in chemistry and the life sciences. And we do everything that we can do to ensure that that happens. And it starts with the vetting of the board members, the people that serve on our different review panel committees, all the way down to the staff. Everyone is supporting Dr. Beckman's vision. And if it's a foundation in perpetuity, it needs to be Dr. Beckman's foundation in perpetuity.
Yeah, there's two aspects of that support of basic research. The first one is that it's very, very difficult now to agencies, governmental agencies and so forth, to support really fundamental high-risk research, because the tendency in the agencies is to support things that have short-term outcomes. There is more and more pressure to work on things where somebody will ask you, well, when's it going to be ready for commercialization? And if the answer isn't, next year or the next 2 or 3 years, then the agencies sort of turn off. Very often they turn off and say, no, we need to support more applied. There's always pressure to put more money into more applied research. Dr. Beckman's vision was to support young people who didn't have the clout yet to get a lot of federal support, who were actually engaged in very high risk but high payoff, potentially high payoff projects. He wanted to invest in these young people who didn't have grants yet but had enormous promise. That was what he wanted to do after discussions with Ted and me, but we had lots of discussions with Dr. Beckman about this. And he came around to, and you'll see it on his videos, I want to support the young people who don't have the clout yet to get big grants. I want to get them started. I want to support them and support their ideas. They're not always going to work out, but who is going to support them if the Beckman Foundation doesn't support them? We may lose these people. So slowly but surely, Dr. Beckman decided, I'm going to put my money into young people, period, and basic research, period. not applied work, not older people, but young people who have got great ideas about doing basic research. That's what we're all about, okay?
Any questions?
Isn't that what we're all about,
That's what we're
Jackie?
all about.
Okay.
We've heard him say it too. We've heard Dr. Beckman say it. You'll see it on his videos.
Over and over.
And that's why we're so committed to young people. That's why if you look at all of our programs, they're all committed to young people. And the ones that aren't, we're probably going to rearrange so they are committed to young people. And Jackie knows what I'm talking about there. And that's our vision program. I
Right.
think we're going to talk about realigning that so that we support the young people who've got a shot at doing basic research that's going to make a big difference down the road. So that's what we're all about.